Hello, everybody. Welcome to Everything in Moderation podcast, the international edition. I have Danny here, and today we're going to talk about Cuba.
Cuba.
Cuba. Cuba Libre.
Yeah, specifically, we're talking about the Cuban protests that are happening right now against and for the communist regime right now. I think they call themselves a Marxist Leninist party
Yep.
or something.
Hmm.
Um, but the reason why this is happening is specifically because the people of Cuba are calling for two things: food and medical supplies. Why are they calling for that? Specifically because their biggest trade partner and a lot of trade partners around the world. I mean, this is, you know, post COVID 2020, when this is happening, right? I mean, there was definitely unrest before, but this is when it was spiking, obviously. They didn't have any trade. They no supply chains. They just were kind of like imports falling, and they couldn't get a lot of the shit basically. So you wonder, why Cuba? Why is Cuba having such a hard problem? I mean, like they have the U.S. They have like a major manufacturing of both food, agriculture in the U.S. is a huge industry, and medical supplies, also a huge industry in the U.S. Why? Well, in the 1960s, we started a trade embargo with Cuba, and since then it has not stopped, and we're kind of just stuck there, And it's definitely a hard point to be at for a nation that's relatively close to us. But you can't honestly talk about the protests that are going on without mentioning the trade embargo, because if the U.S. was a, let's say, moral actor instead of acting on its own behalf, we'd just be like, okay, lift trade embargo. But why? Well, why we ask the question: why does the U.S. have a trade embargo of Cuba still, at least?
What is that reason?
Well, like the reason why they have a trade embargo with Cuba is effectively because they are still a communist regime. And this happens all over South America, right? And it's it's almost like a pattern at this point. It happens like every like 20 years, not even like 10 years, even if there's that much of a gap in between. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, like Chile, Guam. There's a lot of like countries in South America where this has happened, and it happens because the U.S. first sanctions the country and puts economic pressure on the people, which then results in unrest in the country, and they use that unrest to farm propaganda campaigns. They've the CIA. We've already seen it in papers they've had to go and release to us, and they've done it like so many times. So and this is definitely 1,000%, like without a question, happening in Cuba as well. I mean, they are fomenting. They foment almost anything that happens in that region. A lot of, especially when it's against a communist, regime. But it also even happens when they instill leaders that are authoritarian and they get too like crazy. You know, they'll just be like, "All right, kill him, get a new one, recycle." And it really is the reason why this happens is because they want as much trade advantage as possible in South America. And how do they get it? They need capitalists. Like most of the time, it's authoritarian because it's done through coups, but sometimes it cannot be done authoritarian, I have to admit. But it's for this reason that this is happening, and the U.S. It's a business at this point. We've done it for almost a century, I believe. you know so what's your take, Christian, on like the Cuban people, at least on the ground?
It's really interesting, man. And I always look at it from a sporting perspective, too, actually, because I'm a big boxing fan, and there's a lot of great Cuban boxers. In fact, per capita, Cuba has like the most gold medals in boxing and of any nation. They just produce such high quality boxers, and a lot of what they have to do, because you're not allowed to go pro. You can't um, go pro because that's against their brand of communism. I'm not really sure how that system works, like in how wealth is kind of spread or lack of wealth is spread.
Well,
But
it's funny. Do they have currency? I'm pretty sure they have currency, right?
let me take a look. Um,
If they have currency, you technically couldn't call them communists because they're not true communism. True communism would result in no currency. Socialism, the transition stage of communism, would be what they're currently running with right now. But it's
mhm.
weird. They have a weird name. That's why we're very confused, right? It's like Marxist Leninist party or whatever. I was
So
looking it up just before.
they do have a currency. It's the Cuban peso, and one Cuban peso equals 4 cents. So not too easy. But a lot of what the boxers do is when they go to the Olympics, because that's the only they're allowed to um, represent in the Olympics because they're not making any money. Um, so then what happens is when they're at the Olympics and when it's over, they disappear from the camp and then they go and start their professional career because now that it's called defecting from Cuba, and then what that means is they're never allowed to step back foot on the island. But now they can make money as a professional boxer overseas.
So
So
you're saying that boxers defect from Cuba to make money in like basically America or whatever,
yep,
wherever
exactly.
they're allowed to do that. Cuba doesn't fucking come at them.
Oh, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like they're never allowed to go back to Cuba again. They revoke everything. They revoke their passport. They revoke their citizenship. Everything.
I mean, you know, this is why when I think of communist regimes or at least authoritarian regimes, you know, whatever label you want to put. For example, North Korea. If the North Korean leaves, they're looking for you. They're looking at your name, looking for everything, anything about you that they can track, and they'll come grab you as long as you're kind of near China. Maybe they'll go into Europe, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, I guess this might be just I do know that the communist regime right now that is Cuba is relatively lax. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like your you know Fidel Castro days, right? It's very different. Um,
100%, and you could see that. Um, I think that we were even allowed to go to Cuba a couple of years ago.
yep,
I think it was during Obama's years that we were able to go back, and then I think somewhere during the Trump presidency that was revoked again, and we're not allowed to go there again.
big
I mean,
sad.
there's ways around it, obviously, but typically, I would imagine you don't want to be an American being in Cuba or just having that like
Not
con.
right now. Don't go to
No,
Cuba now.
no.
I'm telling you. Listen, listen. This is America's like they have a game plan. They should just like at least print it out and like put it on their like WhiteHouse.gov site at this point when it comes to foreign policy in
Uh-huh.
South America. It is economic pressure, social unrest, coup, right wing authoritarian leadership. That's usually the game plan. The last bit might vary. It really depends on the person and what they're like. You might get someone like Pinochet in Chile. Like you might get some absolutely like crazy person
Yeah.
to just dropping communists out the helicopter, like bye bye. Like that's you don't want any regime to be like that to anybody. You
it's it's
know.
it's crazy how Latin America is like that because they go from one side of the spectrum to the total opposite of the spectrum, but it's still authoritarian in nature.
I mean, honestly, what do you expect?
Yeah.
The American government basically says, let's find this militant force within the country and let's make them the leaders. I mean, that just writes like fascism, like right in there. Like you're missing the part of fascism where they do ethnic shit. Like they either ethnically cleanse or they like fucking are just really like fuck you to this one group, right? You know, it's just missing that part. That's all it's missing there, and I bet it still happens in other countries as well.
Yeah.
Um, you know, hey, honestly, really pisses me off about this whole Cuba issue. It's the fact that we're even talking about Cuba because like there's so many other countries that we could be concerned about, lifting the people out of like a horrible regime. um I'm trying to think of one that comes to mind. Ethiopia.
Okay.
Ethiopia, there is a literal ethnic cleansing going on, and they're just killing people. There's running to towns, militant groups, just shooting down one ethnic group. Why don't we talk about that all? You see that in I don't see it MSNBC or NBC or any other news source like
Now,
that.
what's the nature of that regime? Do you know?
Not,
Like,
I don't really know the true nature. I'm almost positive though, and it goes with a lot of countries within that region of Africa, is that it's more over militant groups. There's zero, actual government control, and if there is government control, they're basically just a militant group that has now won the last battle and now has the throne. Imagine it's like Game of Thrones kind of in Africa, a little bit. That's
yeah.
it might be simplifying it a little too much, but
Um,
it's
I,
definitely a little troublesome there.
yeah, I just looked at it and it says that it's structured in a framework of a federal parliamentary republic.
Well, they'll
Yeah.
obviously have a constitution. You're not going to have a
Uh-huh.
country without one. That'd be so stupid. But like effectively, the government will either be ran by the militant group, and then it would be ran effectively, of course, if it was. Not like actually. When I mean effectively, I mean like it's actually the government, or it's just a just talking piece. Like obviously they'll have like power within the rich and famous there, but especially military groups, you know, that's going to be the big players there.
I would I think that this may be reaching or something, but the reason why you don't hear about something like that could be because like this Ethiopian regime is more of a like fascist kind of leaning thing, and the United States isn't gonna like speak outwardly about that because that darn C word is one that they just don't want to hear. So they tend, I mean, in my experience, I see that they tend to gravitate more towards issues of communism. And listen, my dad's a big Fox News guy. So when he's watching Fox News and they're talking about Cuba, I'm like, okay, so now you care about people's freedom, like another country's like people's freedom. So like
I mean,
it's very weird.
Colombia, the Haitian people,
Yep.
like there's so many countries that what you're the exact situation that you're describing is happening. They're capitalist regimes where they have turned authoritarian, and there's protests and such, and even like assassinations, and you know it, and it really just it's really to be blamed on American politics, at least like international politics within South America. And
And
it just frustrates me
yeah,
so much.
and it's interesting. I'm sure that this frustrates you too, is seeing both sides of the political spectrum here kind of spin it in different ways and be like, oh, like the embargo is the one that is the reason for why Cubans are starving.
Oh,
And
it's not. Listen, and if you got me from saying that
no,
that
no,
is
no,
the
no.
sole
Yeah,
reason, it's not. One hundred
no, I
percent.
know it, but they have like some people are saying it's the embargo, only focusing on the embargo and not on the communism, and then there's some people focusing all on the communism and not on the embargo. So like, it's you're picking and choosing politics. It's your buffet politics, as
Well,
you
it's
call
just it's Cuban. The Cuban government is not effective because it's corrupt. It's plain and simple. They might be pussies now. They might not have missiles and we're backed by Russia, now, but you know they're the same. They're still authoritarian, you know, and they still do not regulate their market in a good way. I would say at all, just because the amount of corruption that is within their government. So it's a two-sided coin there. It's both those reasons. It's both that it's a communist regime, and both that it is, authoritarian.
it. Hmm.
So and the fact that there's a trade embargo. So like why doesn't the US act like a global good actor if we call ourselves the police of the world? I mean, this whole ideology when it comes to neoliberal politics within the international field, we say to ourselves, we have to do this because what do we say to ourselves about Afghanistan recently? Women's rights.
Hmm.
We say the people there are oppressed. Why do we care? Why, as a taxpayer in America, I live here, live in America. I don't live in, I don't live in Saudi Arabia, don't live in Afghanistan, don't live in Vietnam, you know, don't care. Don't care in the slightest about those places. They can go do whatever they want. As long as it doesn't affect me, I might pay taxes, I pay into this war effort, you know, then why am I paying for this?
Uh-huh.
Americans in general are not in favor of any type of like going into conflicts,
Hmm.
and it really shows you down to a T where politicians really where their pockets align, you know. And it's in a lot of places, but definitely one is what we call the military industrial complex.
So, what do you see happening in Cuba? What do you think out of these protests that have been occurring? What do you think is going to be the most prominent thing that's going to come out of this?
Um, so I see a couple options, right? So they might overthrow their government. I don't really see it being like that, just because the riots that are happening right now, compare them to BLM protests, hand in hand, and you will see that somehow Cuban protesters are treated better. Like literally, look at the protest videos. Not shooting you with fucking rubber less than lethal rounds. You know,
Let's get
it's
into
just
funding.
crazy. Uh, but going back to what will happen, it's either they overthrow the government and some either right wing, leader will come in, or the protests will subside because COVID. Well, actually, if the protest subsides, it would have to be that they become authoritarian again, because their economics is going to be fucked for the next couple of not next couple next 10 years because of COVID. It's because how they play economics is much different than us, just because of
Mhm.
how their debt structure works. You know, but it's either a change in regime. It's either a regime change or it's them getting worse as an authoritarian communist regime. Because if they don't make an action, then the U.S. will.
Mm.
They'll just incite a coup immediately. I mean, granted, the U.S. isn't very good at doing coups anymore. To be frank, I mean, what was the last one? Do you remember the last one? And was it Venezuela?
Yeah, yeah, that was
And the
probably the
whole the
last one.
whole dynamics of that entire thing was crazy. So they had a military contractor, and the military contractor goes up to and talks to who's the Guaido. Talks to him. He's like, hey, we're gonna go do this operation, blah blah blah, and we want to go take out um, what's his name, the president of Venezuela,
Um, oh man,
Maduro.
yes.
Maduro.
Uh-huh.
They want to go take out Maduro. Initially, they're like, okay, so who are you backed by? We can't tell you. It's straight up, we can't tell you. He did not talk to Guaido directly. He's talking to the secretary. He's just like, no, all right, we're not doing this. Nope, bye bye. And then literally 5 days later, they all get caught.
Oh man.
Well, I wonder who those mystery backers were. Maybe some just random rich guys like, oh, let's fuck up fucking Venezuela for no reason. Like it's such a facade. Like
Yeah.
it's so like just freaking say it. Put it in your international politics shit. Biden, tell me what you're doing with this South American country and the next one. I don't like the bullshit anymore. I'm tired of it.
Do you think that we should a president, either Biden or a future president, should bring back like fireside chats?
Could you imagine Biden doing a fireside chat, bro? He'd
Oh,
fall asleep.
hello, it's your president, Joseph
He would.
Biden.
He'd fall asleep. It'd be like me trying to talk to my grandfather for 3 hours, you know. But honestly, yes. But the reality of that is just gonna be just so much like just neoliberal propaganda
Yeah,
in just one intake. Like I like the old fireside chats. The new ones would be like we're diversifying the workforce. We love transgender people and economy. Think we're doing good. Now I'm going to look at that. People, wealth distribution. You know, it's just all going to be bullshit when it
and
comes
then
to fireside
don't forget they're
chats.
gonna add a word from their sponsors, the Johnson
Yes,
Johnson commercial.
commercials on C-SPAN. Let's go.
Yeah,
About time. Honestly, that would really, yeah, that'd really make my day. Not, and the funny thing is, I watch C-SPAN, so that would make my watching experience worse. But at the end of the day, it's such like a fucking metaphor, man. Like, what? C-SPAN has commercials?
yeah.
Fucking
Um,
capitalists.
so that was actually one of the things where if we or if Cuba managed to overthrow the government, I wouldn't say that that's necessarily um, a good thing. Obviously, it's a good thing that like this regime is getting tossed out. That's good in itself. But now they're without any sort of authority, and then they're subject to a lot of foreign influence, which whether it could be us, it could be China. I mean, I'd say that's probably it. It would probably be either us or China.
Yeah,
Maybe a little Venezuela there, but
it'd be a really interesting thing that could happen. Why don't we just annex Cuba? Be honest, just fucking do it already. That'd be much better than the situation that Cuba is going to be going through because they are still a corrupt country, you know, and it's almost always going to be like that unless they themselves, the people, can rise up and solve their internal problems.
mhm.
But they're not focused on that. Obviously, such a split group in Cuba. It's all really like the politics that we have here. It's not getting us anywhere. If you think that the politics that's going on the stage, even in the United States, but in also Cuba, it's getting anybody anywhere. If there's any progress trying to solve the shitty bits of the nation, there isn't. Why? Because corrupt people don't want change.
Mhm.
They want to keep it the way they are. And they want to keep their wealth. So you're going to have to struggle. And I don't believe Cuba really has the time for that. Literally, I think they they have about a year or so until they get some random coup.
It was pretty interesting that you say that too, because these protests kind of started very randomly as well. Because I was thinking like all right, so it's about food and medicine, but like why didn't this happen a month ago, a week ago? Like it's like why did it happen like when it did? Um, and I'm not saying it's like a conspiracy or something, but it's interesting to see how it could reach a breaking point for the people. And I guess it got to that point where now they actually started taking action and they're not afraid to take action or not are just willing to take action because years and years of non-protest. I mean, maybe if there were protests in Cuba in the past century or whatever, there's probably not probably not a lot, not a large scale, not to ones that we see today. So it's interesting to see how, I guess, since the Castro took over, how this is compounded and snowballed into like what it is now.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that you mentioned that about Castro. Castro has uniquely affected this protest because why are the old people, know, so against the communist regime that is Cuba because they lived through him.
Hmm.
And the young people are like, this is a dying authoritarian communist regime. Maybe we can, you know, either make an actual go of communism, or, and I don't think that's a realistic goal to be completely honest with you, or, you know, bring Cuba up from the structure and maybe change things and make it, you know, capitalist, but make it for the people. You know, there's ways to do that. You know, um, but it's just hard with Cuba. You know, it's hard to predict anything's going there. And you know, just to bring it back a little bit on the point what you mentioned is how the U.S. directly goes and does this with nations and how they like do civil unrest.
Hmm.
So it can take many forms. It sometimes goes through the military where they train guerrilla soldiers and they do just a direct coup. But always in the stages before that, and sometimes just this, they'll go around and either have agents or they'll hire people and just put up propaganda, just literally posters, such. And they'll also have groups of people. They'll group people. They'll have literally insiders. So they'll go in and be like, "Hey, man, like if there's like a small protest, they'll be like, I'm so done with this shit. Like, just have a ton of like 16 people surrounding like four guys that are actually like trying to like bring this up and like do this. So it's a lot of like just trying to hype up this event. Like they're literally like imagine if a bunch of promoters
Yeah.
in Las Vegas were running around in Cuba. That's kind of what it's like, and it's weird. It happens not just in Cuba. It happens pretty much anywhere in this kind of instance. It happened in Chile as well. So the U.S. is very good at this point. That's why, you know, when people talk about what's going on at Black Lives Matter protests, so much destruction, you know, you have to also realize that I can 100% guarantee you that some of the destruction that was caused, not all, not even most, some of the destruction that was caused from the Black Lives Matter protests, some of it was instigated by people of the opposition. Why would they do that? To make them look worse, to bring in like just soldiers, fuck them up, get them get the fuck out.
Little
Obviously, that's what they want,
little
so they
false
know.
flag operation.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and that just tells you how used to this Americans are,
Hmm.
right? That we even do it here. So and the reason why I even say that is because I saw a couple of videos of it. There was one guy like there's like fucking full face covering, goes into AutoZone, just takes a fucking Molotov, throws it in, walks out, just walks away. I was like, what the fuck? Oh my god! I was like, what the fuck is this? I think that was in Minneapolis. Oh my god, that was just so weird to me. But the
It's a
U.S. definitely
strange.
knows those strategies.
It's a strange time. It's a strange time. You know, I mean, just off of this, just to connect this a little bit, the Haitian president was murdered a couple weeks ago as well. So a lot of stuff happened in the Caribbean and Latin America. So um, it's interesting to see because the Haitian president was actually murdered by, um, I think like contractors or something because they
So
said
it,
that they said that they spoke English, yeah. But
yeah.
that could always be a ruse as well because I mean it always goes back to the Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2
So
mission.
here's the
No less.
thing. Here's the thing though about the Haitian one, right? Why would they do that? He's a capitalist.
Uh-huh.
It would either be this is actually happening, and the story that they said was there was a government official that got fired, um, and like I think that he thought the president was targeting him because he was in Miami, and then he sent a death squad to go kill the president.
Mhm.
That's the story. I don't know if that's true. Probably not. However, it just doesn't make sense that America would be,
Yeah.
you know, they might be indirectly involved, but why? Why would they? All their You know, if it's good, I don't know how bad that regime was. If it was really bad, then America could get involved. I mean, we've done that before when it comes to even like one there are countries that we have good ties with.
Supposedly it was pretty bad, but you just don't see the level of interest in news media coverage to where you would even think of that, unless it was really sneaky. But like again, like I'm not saying that the U.S. instigated any of this, but it's interesting to see how Latin America is plagued by a lot of these like assassinations of public figures, whether it's the head of the government who is striking down his opposition, or it is the opposition striking down the head. So it's definitely a big clusterfuck of
Assassination culture, bro.
yes. That's basically what we got going on here. So just to close, in the next decade, where do you see Cuba next decade? If we look at it, 2031, where do you see them?
I hope. Well, I'm just gonna say what I hope and what they'll probably be. I hope they are a nice resort island. I can go there and vacation, have a little rum runner, right? And the UX just annex them instead of having to deal with the reality of the situation, which they'll probably either overthrow their communist regime and turn into a more capitalist system. From there, you'll see how the leader is. I'm not going to speculate how the leader is going to be 10 years down the line. But if the Cuban system stays how it is and fights off these protests, they will become more authoritarian because of it. And I guarantee you're going to see a big problem with the U.S. and Cuba then. And then maybe Cuba gets annexed then, and maybe it circles back to the initial vacation strategy. That's all I could hope for. All I could hope for, because even though it would still the conditions Cuba would probably be a little shitty, still because Puerto Rico, blah blah
Yes.
blah, the other examples. The healthcare would actually take a notch, believe it or not, would go down 2 points if they went to go to the U.S. system.
Yeah.
But it would be ultimately better for the people there. They have a better quality of life.
So that's all we have today. Danny, thank you for the insight. We hope that Cuba finds the answers that best suit their public. That's all we could ever hope for. Whether
Do
that's
that.
under any sort of system, under any name. Uh, not not all of us really care what what the name of the system is. If they start with another brand of communism and it works for them, fair. If they go with the capitalist approach and they see success, absolutely. What we're here to do is give you our opinions on what is going to happen with each system. That's what we do. We're not here to pick and play. But either way, thank you for watching. Danny, thank you for the insight again. And that is all
Problem.
from us. See you guys next week. Bye bye.